If Texas wants to finally break through and win the Big 12, this is the year to do it. The Longhorns are loaded with talent, and now is the time to stop talking about the expectations and start living up to the expectations. So welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, guys. Today, breaking down everything you need to know about Texas football and predicting the Longhorns' schedule and record for this upcoming college football season. As always, please continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and of course, check out everything down in the description below, including our expert picks over on our website, thegridironexpert.com, some of the best college football and NFL spread picks in the entire country for one of the lowest prices in the entire country, beating out over 80% of the national analysts and handicappers in the entire country each of the last 5 years. Also, go check out our Patreon account for exclusive college football content. Become a member of our Patreon Wall of Fame. Exclusive content year-round. Won't be posted anywhere but Patreon, and we want you to take advantage of that. And we want you also to become a part of our GE Nation by liking, commenting, subscribing, and sending us some gear as well to represent your team as we try to get the most GE Nation representation from coast to coast. So guys, you take a look at Texas, right? Every year it feels like Texas is back. Texas is going to be so good. Oh, they recruited so well. And what do? They go 7-5, 8-5, maybe 9-3 if they're lucky. But they don't live up to the expectations. Texas expects championships. This is the year they have to do it. And this is the year they could do it. 10 starters back offensively for Steve Sarkisian and his squad, guys. 10 starters back after putting up over 34 points per game last year and over 430 yards per game. I mean, they're loaded. I mean, Quinn Ewers is back. And if he can stay fully healthy, he could have one heck of a season. And even if he doesn't stay fully healthy, they've got a guy named Arch Manning right behind him waiting in the wings. The quarterback room is really, really good. They return their top 3 pass catchers, including the star Xavier Worthy. They return one of the best offensive lines in the entire country. The offense is going to be just fine. It has a chance to be one of the better offenses in the country. Defensively, 6 starters back on that side of the ball from a unit that, to me, was criminally underrated last year, allowing just 21.6 points per game. 3 of their top 4 tacklers are back, led by Jalen Ford at the linebacking position. That back 7 going to be pretty solid for Texas this year. And this is a team, guys, that when you look at them, last year, they failed to live up to expectations. 8-4, not a terrible year, especially when you realize they had a losing record the year prior. All 5 losses by 1 possession. Heartbreaking loss to Alabama. Heartbreaking loss to Texas Tech. Heartbreaking loss to Washington in their bowl game. And they had their opportunities to put together a better season, but now is the time to finally do it. Now's the time to not look in the past, but say, hey, we've got the pieces now. Let's start winning these games. You take a look at the Longhorn schedule this year, it really is pretty favorable. They've got a couple of very tough matchups, of course, but they have an opportunity to do something very special here. We think they open up the season 1-0 with a win over Rice. That's going to really allow Texas to flex their muscle a little bit and show who's boss in the state, right? Then the next week they go to Alabama. That's the big marquee matchup that we've all been talking about. That's the one. That's an opportunity for Texas to really put the nation on notice. If they can stroll into a night game in Tuscaloosa and beat Nick Saban in Alabama, talk about a statement victory. Talk about it. We realize that Texas should have won last year. I think most of us can agree with that. The Longhorns lost 20-19 at home to Alabama, and I do believe, as many of you probably do as well, that had Quinn Ewers not gotten hurt in that game against Alabama, the Longhorns would have defeated the Crimson Tide. He doesn't get hurt, Texas wins. But shoulda, woulda, coulda. It is what it is. You move on. Many believe now that Texas can beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa. The Crimson Tide have a lot of questions that they typically don't have. The quarterback position up in the air. Actually having to go to the transfer portal late, landing Tyler Buckner out of Notre Dame to try to come lead the charge. Apparently not having much faith in Jalen Milroe or Ty Simpson. But here's the thing that's preventing me from picking Texas. We are siding with Alabama in this game. You don't beat Alabama by running the ball. You just don't do it. Even last year with Bijan Robinson, Texas only mustered 79 rushing yards against the Crimson Tide. I don't expect Texas to have much success running the ball this year against Alabama. Alabama's strength defensively, at least one of them, the secondary. The secondary is really, really good. I think it's going to be a tough day for Quinn Ewers in a very electric, tough atmosphere to get anything going offensively. I'm not saying Alabama blows out Texas by any means, but I just don't think the Longhorns have enough to go on the road and steal this win, even with Alabama's offensive struggles. Crimson Tide get a narrow victory, an instant classic, but Texas falls to 1-1. I do think they bounce back. They'll beat Wyoming. They'll be 2-1. Then they start Big 12 conference play. That's what matters, right? That's what happens in their quest for a Big 12 title. Open it up on the road at Baylor. Not an easy place to play. Not a game Texas can afford to overlook, but a game that I do feel that Texas will win. They beat Baylor 38-27 last year. Started very slow, actually trailed by 3 in the fourth quarter, but finally woke up. Offense had a couple great drives there. Defense stepped up, won that game ultimately by 11. The Baylor offensive line, for me, major concern right now. I can see Texas generating a lot of pressure on Blake Shapen. Baylor's defensive weakness, their secondary. Quinn Ewers could go out there and have himself a day against this Baylor defense that really failed to live up to expectations last year as well. Texas, all those things considered, I think goes on the road and does beat Baylor. They're 3-1, and let's make them 4-1 with a home win over Kansas. Now, I know what many will say. Hey. Didn't the last time Kansas came to Austin, Texas lost? Yes, Texas lost in overtime, 57-56, the last time Kansas and Texas played in Austin. But last year, Texas got their revenge, beating Kansas 55-14 on the road. Kansas, just like Texas, practically returns everybody offensively. I think they'll hang more than 14 points on Texas this year. But Texas is way better, in my opinion, than they were last year. They've got home field advantage now. They're not losing to Kansas, and they're going to put up a lot of points on a Kansas defense that still is far from where it needs to be. The offense might be great, but they don't have the defense. Texas wins big over Kansas, make them 4-1. Now they're 4-1 heading into the Red River rivalry against Oklahoma and what will be the last meeting between Oklahoma and Texas as members of the Big 12, because, of course, both are moving to the SEC next year. So already a very intense and emotional game because it's one of the best rivalries in college football. Now, even more stakes added because whoever wins this has the bragging rights saying, yeah, we're both going to the SEC together, but we won the last Big 12 game. And this is a game. This is really a game that has major Big 12 title implications and could be the first of 2 meetings. Could meet again in the Big 12 championship later on. I mean, look at this right now, guys. I mean, Texas won 49-0 last year over the Sooners. It was an unbelievable performance. Yes, Dylan Gabriel wasn't playing. I get that. Oklahoma mustered 39 passing yards in the game against Texas last year. Still no excuse for Oklahoma's poor defensive performance. Texas was on a completely different level. Quinn Ewers was on a completely different level. And while I don't think this game results in another 49-0 game or even a, let's say, blowout victory, I do believe Texas wins this game. I believe Texas owns the offensive edge. Not significantly, but they do own the offensive edge. Defensively, you can make a case for either team there, but I'm going to still lean a little bit with Texas right now. I love Texas in this game. I think they're going to take down Oklahoma in a closer game than it was last year. It'll deliver as maybe an instant classic in the last Big 12 meeting, but the Longhorns will win, and with that, they will be 5-1 heading into their bye week and possibly still a top 10 team with their only loss coming on the road at Alabama. Coming out of the bye week at 5-1, they take on Houston, an old Southwest Conference game. You got to love it. You got to love kind of seeing some of these rivalries renewed. And Texas going to be playing what should be, or is, the first Big 12 newcomer on their schedule. They play Houston, they play BYU. They somehow avoid UCF and Cincinnati. But playing Houston is going to be exciting, kind of bring back some memories for some people that were around to watch those old Southwest Conference games. But this should be a relatively easy win for Texas. Coming off that week of rest, staying in the state, facing a Houston team that has a bad secondary. So you talk about Baylor, one of their concerns with the secondary. We think Quinn Ewers is going to have himself a pretty good day. I think the same thing happens here against Houston as the Cougars gave up 279 passing yards per game last year. I don't expect them to improve that mark that much. Texas should have a field day offensively, and they'll take down Houston. So the Longhorns, they're rolling. They're looking really good. They continue to roll with a home win over BYU. Ironically, interestingly enough, Texas has not fared well against BYU in the series history. 1-4 all time against BYU. But I think with this game at home, they're going to make it 2-4 all time. Last time here, 2014, BYU destroyed the Longhorns, beating them 41-7. I just don't see it now. The Cougars were kind of a disappointment last year, had a lot of guys back, didn't really live up to those expectations. The defense was a major concern. That's going to be a kind of big deciding factor in how well BYU does in their first year in the Big 12 is how quickly can Jay Hill, the new defensive coordinator for BYU, come in there and fix things. Facing one of the better offenses in the entire country in their house, you might improve your offense or defense throughout the year, but it's not going to be enough to take down Texas. Texas takes down BYU, and I think to kick off November, they beat Kansas State as well. And I'm not trying to move through it quickly here, but Texas actually has kind of owned Kansas State lately. Texas, for all it's been worth, even in the years where they have failed to live up to expectations, you typically can bet on them to beat Kansas State. They've won 6 straight games in the series and have managed to win the close games. 5 of the 6 games decided by one possession, including a 34-27 road victory last year. The game now still in Austin. Kansas State going to be about as good as they were last year. I'd say lose a handful of key pieces such as Deuce Vaughn. Both these teams lose their star running backs in Bijan Robinson and Deuce Vaughn. But with this game at home, I really like Texas to take care of business here. I think it's going to be physical again. I wouldn't be surprised if we see another one-possession game. That's how good this Kansas State team is. Consistency at quarterback with Will Howard is great. The defense always good. And if you're Texas, you can't afford to overlook Kansas State in preparation for TCU or even getting, just in mentally thinking the pressure's on. We are in college football playoff discussion. We've never been in college football playoff discussion this late before. We know we can't slip up. You don't want to slip up to, I wouldn't say an inferior opponent, but a game that maybe you shouldn't lose. And Kansas State, to me, is not a game that they should lose. Texas does win at home, and now they're 3 games away from potentially finishing 11-1 and going to the Big 12 championship game. They do that, they go to the college football playoff. Again, we haven't really seen Texas in this position this late in the year. Unfortunately for Texas, I think all those hopes of a college football playoff berth come crumbling down at TCU on November 11th. I think that's what happens here. This Texas team is really, really good, guys. But I don't think they're good enough to go through the entire Big 12 slate unscathed. I just don't see it. And TCU, to me, is the most logical place outside of maybe, you can make the argument Baylor could beat them. You can make the argument Oklahoma could beat them. But TCU, to me, is the one that feels like a bigger trap game, especially as the pressure continues to mount. TCU played a phenomenal defensive game last year against the Longhorns. Texas couldn't get the ball moving at home against the Horned Frogs. Lost 17-10. They were held to 199 yards on the day. TCU's defense, they returned 7 starters. Joe Gillespie going to do a better job defensively than he did last year. One of their strengths, TCU, for this year on defense is their secondary. A lot of starters back in that position group. I just don't think Quinn Ewers on the road is going to come out there and deliver. I just don't think he can do that against a TCU team that's not going to fall off. They're not going to completely collapse. They're still going to be very competitive, and they'd love nothing more than to spoil an in-state rival's playoff hopes. And I think that's exactly what they're going to do. Texas had their opportunity to do it to TCU last year, fell just short. TCU beats the Longhorns again, this time on their home turf. Texas takes their second loss, but only the lone conference loss of the year. So Big 12 title hope still very much intact. Very much intact. And I will tell you right now that we, in fact, do have Texas going to the Big 12 championship game because they will defeat Iowa State and they will defeat Texas Tech, which is going to give Texas a 10-2 record and a 8-1 mark in conference play. At Iowa State, I will say Texas probably should have lost that game last year. They survived the Cyclones 24-21. The Cyclones fumbling deep into Texas territory with little time left. Texas escaped with that victory. They do need to be mindful on the road. Ames not an easy place to play. Iowa State has played Texas extremely close as of late. The defense is good enough to slow down this Texas offense, and the Longhorns are hung over after a loss at TCU. I would not be shocked to see them lose to Iowa State at all. I really wouldn't. But I think mentally they know it's only one conference loss. Playoff, we might be out of that. That hurts. But we still can get a Big 12 title berth and a win. We can still make a New Year's 6 bowl game. We can't afford to slip up. I don't think Steve Sarkisian allows it to happen. I think they take down Iowa State, and I do think they take down Texas Tech. I know they lost to the Red Raiders 37-34 in overtime last year, but Texas, for the most part, has dominated this series. Won 16 of the last 20 against the Red Raiders. It's at home. It's senior day. All the pieces together. Big 12 title berth possibly on the line. Texas won't lose this game, although you could see a lot of points scored because that Red Raiders offense is going to be unbelievable. But with that, guys, Texas 10-2. That's what we've been waiting for. Every year, Texas is going to be great. They're going to win 10 games, 11 games, championships, this and that, and they never do. This is the year I think they finally deliver. All the pieces are there. The schedule is there. We saw flashes of it last year. This is the year that I think Steve Sarkisian finally puts it all together. This is a dangerous team. They are the Big 12 favorite for many for a reason. And I'm telling you, they beat Alabama or TCU, at least by our marks. They end that year 11-1. A win in the Big 12 championship game will send them to the college football playoff. This is, to me, a legitimate playoff contender. Just a matter if they can get there or not. I don't think they're good enough to run through the entire Big 12 slate undefeated. I don't think that's going to be the case. But Texas is going to be a tough out for every team they play, and this is the year that I think they finally come through, finally deliver, finally live up to those expectations. So guys, as always, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and check out everything down in the description below, including our expert picks over on the gridironexpert.com, including our Patreon account as well, and the mailing address to send us some gear to represent your team so we can have our GE Nation shining from coast to coast. And once again, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.